Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jeremy Aria. I'm here in the CST National Office, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the 2:15 roundtable session today, which is our session entitled Beyond the Human Species with our sponsor, Conduent Public Health Solutions. We really appreciate Conduent's continued partnership with the annual CST conference, and I'd like to introduce our speakers today from Conduent staff, Kenneth Hughes and Pamela Knight Schwartz, who are here today to guide us through our presentation. And I hope you all will enjoy it, and I'm going to pass it to Ken and Pam.
Thank you, Jeremy. Ken, are you ready to share your slides? Ken, if you're talking, you're muted.
Can you see that now?
Yeah, I hear you now, which is good. I do not see your screen. There we go. Perfect. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment before we get started to thank everybody who's joined us this afternoon. We're grateful that out of all of your options for today's session that you chose to come to our roundtable session. My name is Pam Schwartz, and I'm the Director of Public Health Consulting at Conduent Public Health Solutions. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ken Hughes, and he's the Director of Client Relationships at Conduent. We both work on the Maven team as partners to our clients who use the Maven disease surveillance and outbreak management platform. We want to get started on the demo piece, so I'll be brief. In preparation for today, I'm not going to lie, I wanted to talk about anything but COVID while we shared the capabilities of Maven as a product. As we prepared for today's session, it occurred to us that non-human surveillance is an area that most people don't associate with Maven. So today we're going to show a demo system that focuses on rabies and arboviral diseases. Next slide, please. So first, very briefly, why is non-human surveillance important? The CDC's One Health initiative, go forward one more slide, Ken, sorry. It aims to recognize the interconnectedness between people, animals, plants, and their shared environment. Non-human surveillance can be used to discover and monitor environmental and human health hazards or bioterrorism, predicts the spread of disease, and help target interventions for high-risk areas. Animals are ideal surveillance tools for this because they spend more time outdoors and therefore have higher exposures to the environment and potential pathogens that can infect animals and humans. Next slide, please. And as we were putting this together, I came across this quote that I thought that highlighted some of the issues today. A likely reason for underutilizing animals as the surveillance tools is that human and animal health surveillance efforts mostly stem from disparate initiatives, resulting in data being kept in entirely separate databases. Thus, there is thus an increasing need for interdisciplinary integration between human and veterinary medicine and communication. This is true not just between animals and human surveillance, but a lot of our data in public health is siloed and there needs to be more integration. Maven can help integrate this data, providing a holistic overview of the status of disease in any community. So next slide, please, Ken. Okay, so as I said, we're going to look at rabies and arboviral diseases as examples of what Maven can help track and then report on. So for those of you who aren't as knowledgeable about these two viruses and virus areas as I wasn't, I wanted to give a quick 101 on each of them, and we'll start with rabies. Next slide, please. Rabies is a viral disease that affects both animals and humans, most specifically mammals. It's an RNA virus, and there are different variants of the rabies virus found in animals. It's found in both domestic and wild animals, and in the US, it's mostly seen in wild animals like bats and raccoons and skunks and foxes. Outside of the US, though, dogs are the main carriers of the rabies virus, and you may have seen the news this week, just like 2 days ago, that the US has recently banned the importation of dogs from more than 100 countries for the next year as a result of fraudulent rabies vaccination certificates that have been seen over the past 2 years. Rabies is a serious condition that affects the central nervous system and results in death if it's not treated. It's transmitted through the saliva of an infected animal, usually through bites, although on rare occasions, scratches and open wounds can be affected if they come into contact with the saliva. Next slide, please. The incubation period for rabies can range from 3 to 12 weeks, and in this case, incubation period reflects the period of time that it takes for the virus to get to the brain once it enters the body. The length of that incubation period can vary depending on where the location of the exposure was, the variants of the virus, and any existing immunity in the animal. During that incubation period, there's no sign of illness present. And then once the virus reaches the brain, the virus begins appearing in the saliva and the clinical symptoms start to manifest. These are not always the typical foaming at the mouth that we hear of and see in the movies. There's a list of potential symptoms here that I won't read out loud to you, but you can find this is all from the CDC website. Once the virus enters the body, it needs to get to the brain, and that's when that happens. So next slide, please. The second area that we're going to show is a method of setting things up for arbor viral diseases. So let's talk quickly about those. Next slide, please. Arbor viruses are a group of diseases that affect both animals and humans. These viruses are transmitted through the bite of infected arthropods, such as mosquitoes, ticks, sandflies, and things like that. Humans and horses are considered dead end hosts because they cannot transmit the virus back to uninfected mosquitoes, whereas birds are considered amplifying hosts for arboviruses because they can both be infected and then infect mosquitoes. An arboviral infection then can be tracked in dead birds, whereas these infections are usually reported to the public health departments by people who are not part of the public health entity. There are at least 14 nationally notifiable arboviral diseases in the United States. Most of the US states have reported arboviral activity in humans or mosquitoes or birds or other animals. And there are vaccines available to protect horses against arboviral diseases, and it's recommended that horses be vaccinated and get regular booster shots. There are not a lot of vaccines for humans for arboviruses. Next slide, please. Arboviral diseases are relatively rare, but they can result in severe neuroinvasive disease and even death, especially in the populations that are immunocompromised, elderly or young. There's no treatment for arboviral infections. And as I said, no human vaccines for most of the arboviruses that are endemic to the United States. To reinforce our theme of today, surveillance of non-human vectors can help predict the spread of arboviral and other diseases, and non-human surveillance can help public health departments with implementing targeted interventions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn this over to Ken, and as he gets set up for the Maven demo, let's talk briefly about Maven and the demo that he'll be doing. Maven is known as an application because it's hyper configurable and it's super flexible. Today, Ken is going to show us some of the capabilities of Maven and how those work. I do want to point out this is a demo system that's been configured specifically for the demo today, and it's just a small subset of what Maven can do: data collection models, workflows, and reports. And they're designed around the capability, not around the disease investigation. So I ask you to view it in that light. In an actual Maven implementation, our carefully prepared base models are configured to collect all of the information needed for CDC reporting, and then can be configured for any jurisdiction-specific needs for any disease investigation. This configurability lets our clients make changes to their Maven and adapt to the changing needs of public
now that I'm unmuted, Zoom hung up on my phone, so I apologize for that. I'm hoping that you can hear me. As I was saying, I'm going to turn this over to Ken, and I just want to point out for him that all of our data has been preloaded. There's no PHI involved, and we're just going to give it to Ken.
Yeah, I thought I had been the one who lost audio there, but thankfully not. Okay, so thank you, Pam. We're going to go ahead and look at the Maven system itself here, and we're going to look at it in a couple different ways, right? We're going to start by looking at it from the main application, but we will also look at it through the portal, the public-facing portal. I'm going to start by talking about animal rabies. We'll look at some bite investigations, and then we'll pivot into talking about arboviral investigations or infections and arboviral surveillance. So as I go to log in here on the main application, I'm going to be logging in as a super user. So you're going to see more in the interface than a typical user might see. But we'll quickly kind of go over the interface, and then from there start looking at the cases themselves. So I'm going to log in as there. All right, and that pops up every time. So so this is what we call the Maven splash screen. Some people call it the dashboard, but internally it's known as a splash screen, and it's divided into two separate areas. We have on the left side here a menu, and this is a context sensitive menu. So if you're in a case, it varies from what you see here on the splash screen. On the right hand side, we have a configurable area, and generally and this is configurable by our clients, and when we work with clients and do implementations, we configure this to match their needs. Generally though, they all have this recent records at the top, some workflows, and then even some tasks below that. And then on the right hand side of this, you'll have things like your quick links, so links to important information that the user might find helpful, or maybe even links to some CDC guidance, that sort of thing. Could have some calendar information, and could also have a report, some report graphs and that sort of thing as well. So again, this is generally configurable based off of the client's needs. So we're going to start by looking at actual animal rabies cases. And in this scenario, we're looking at a case where we're going to look at a case where a wild raccoon is suspected of having rabies and has potentially exposed a domestic animal and its owner, right? Both in this case, both of these, both the pet and the owner were bitten. So we're gonna have a look at a case here that I have bookmarked at the top here. I'm gonna come into this case, and we're gonna have a look at this case and how we would collect data on that. One thing to note as we look at the animal rabies case, the bite investigation, all of the cases that we're looking at today, because they're animal specific, they're de-identified data. Kind of gets away from one of the strengths of Maven, which is using identified persons and then deduplicating against that. But for animals, there's not enough unique identifiers to kind of deduplicate that data. So what we're looking at here will be de-identified data, de-identified animal data.
Kenneth?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Jen Brown from Indiana. I was wondering if I could ask you to make the text on the screen just a tiny bit bigger.
How's that?
That's much better. Thank you.
All right, cool. I was worried that might be an issue, so I didn't account for. Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Okay, so again, we've moved into this case, this particular rabies case, and you can see the menu on the side has changed somewhat. We have things like print event getting added and that sort of thing. And the right-hand side of the screen has changed more significantly. We have the basic information about the case and what kind of linked events or exposure sites or attachments are there. We have a notes area over here on the side, and then we have a notification area. And notifications could be anything from, hey, this is in a workflow, which we'll cover a little bit later, or, you know, there's some issue with this case that needs to be resolved. So we could have concerns or that sort of thing in there. The actual data collection occurs further down on the page, right? If we look at this event data tab, you can see we have these things called question packages. And these question packages are where all your data elements reside. And they are grouped in such a way that, you know, they make sense to be grouped together. This is all configurable, right? What we have here is kind of our base model of how we think this should be done based on our understanding of it, but during implementations, we may change that. So things like the administration question package would contain things like key dates, like when it was reported, or the status of the animal, right? The animal information itself, the question package may contain things like what type of animal, what category, was it wildlife, a pet, that sort of thing. Submitting agency and owner information, I think, is somewhat self-explanatory, but we're going to focus on the exposure information, and we're actually going to go into that question package so you can see how that data is going to look, or how that is going to be presented and how you would start entering data. So I'm going to click in here. And so again, this is, as I said at the start, this is an example of a raccoon having bitten both a pet and a human. So at the top here, we have the animal exposure information. And this is, it all starts off with a question of, did this rabies animal expose another animal? And in this case, yes. And you can put in information about what type of animal was exposed, and what kind of exposure they had, as well as information about the owner themselves, right? And then below that, we have a narrative or a description of the animal. Further down on the page, we get into a section on the human exposure information. Again, similar to above with the animal exposure information, but a little bit configured a little bit differently, in that, yes, there was a human exposure. Yes, there was a bite. How many people were bitten? We can put that in there. And then what kind of wounds, and again, more description. And then below that, we actually have the ability to see which persons were bitten. And in this case, we have Billy Bob, the owner of the dog, has been bitten. And I know for a fact that we have a human rabies case for Billy Bob in the system. So I can actually come in here, do a search. Let me find for Bob, search. And then I can see Billy Bob's human rabies case, and add that in. And I'm linking that to this animal, right? And not only am I linking this, I'm also pulling information from Billy Bob's case into this case. So I can see what Billy Bob's case status is. It's a probable diagnosis, and some pertinent contact information as well. So all of that can kind of get pulled in. Not only that, I can add additional people. So if we set up here that this person or this raccoon bit 2 or 3 people, we could add multiple people in here and link multiple people in. So that covers the exposure information. I will touch on the laboratory testing information quickly, which is any kind of labs that occur. In this case, this raccoon was killed after the bite incident, but they were able to get a sample of the brain for testing purposes. We would collect information about when it was sent to the lab, when it was received by the lab, and then the various tests. We'll come back to this when we look at arboviral, because it's a similar question package there as well. So that's one of the ways in which we bring a potential rabies case into the system, and this is a case where we find some wild animal or some kind of exposure in this case. Another way that this could come into the system is via our public portal. So the general public could have access and register to our public portal in order to enter cases or bite incidents or investigations directly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log out of the main side of the application and come into our public portal here on the other tab. And so you can see over here, we have a registration area and then a sign in. I already have a user created, but essentially what this would allow is anybody in the public to come in and register and then log in and be able to enter data into the system. And so I'm going to log in as myself rather than the super user. And you'll see here that while it has a somewhat similar look and feel to the regular Maven application, it is vastly different in its layout. At the top here, we have the ability to create a new event. And our only option here is a bite investigation. So that means you could have multiple options, but in this case, in this use case, it's configured only for a bite investigation. I could go in and report a new event, give it a date, let's say on the 8th, and bite incident, and let it know the state, and click next. And then I'm presented with this question package, or this long form question package where I can put in information about the bite victim, the age, gender, address, and details about the incident itself, right? So all of this information can be put in. I'm not going to put that in right at the moment, because what I'll do is I'm going to come out here and actually look at a different event that we already have submitted. So I'm going to come in here and put in the record ID. And so this one was previously inputted into the system. And you can see now that I have it as the active record. After I search for it and opened it, it becomes the active record. You get an event summary at the top. You get a person summary right here. Of course, it's a de-identified person in this case. And then we have the question packages as well. One of the other key things I want to point out here as well is that the ability to attach documents. So if a bite incident occurred and they managed to get a picture of the animal or what have you, they could attach that here. And again, I can come into the actual question package and see how it was filled out. You can see all of this is grayed out because this particular case has already been submitted into the system, right? So once they submit it into the system, it's no longer editable at that point, because once it's submitted, it goes from being the responsibility of the person who's reporting it to the public health agency or the department who handles this, right? And so we're going to look at this particular case on the other side of the application. I'm going to close that case out. You can see I created a few cases as I was prepping for things, and you'll see some of these reflected on the other side as well. So I'm going to log out here, excuse me, and come back to our main application, because the question then becomes, public are entering all these cases into this this public portal. How do we learn about, or how does the department know to follow up on them or to do any action on them? And that's where Maven workflows come into this, right? You can see here below the recent records that we've been looking at, you can see this new bite investigation workflow here. And so what this does is it collects all of the cases that are entered via the portal, new bite investigation cases that are entered via the portal, and throws them in this workflow for someone at the department, some public health user, to come in and manipulate and follow up their investigation. So I can actually come into this new bite investigation and I can see all these cases in here. You'll note some of the event IDs are familiar. Again, we're dealing with a de-identified person here. So in some situations where it isn't identified, you could potentially have the name show up here as well. But in this case, it was de-identified. So these are some of the cases that I entered. And you can also see that 301 case that I was working on in the portal is here as well. So I can actually click into it and go down to the wizards here. And that's a collection of questions from the question packages. And I can see Laura Dozen is here, and all the information that we had entered in the, or that had been entered in the portal is now contained herein. So I can cancel out of here. And there might be follow-up items that they want to add that you don't expose to the public. It's only available for the health department to fill in after the fact. So things like the owner information might only be exposed to the department itself. And then I can also see here on my notifications for this particular case, I see that it is indicating that this is in a workflow. So I can see and view this list. And again, I can see that what workflow it resides in. And then I can click into that and it brings me back here. If I want to get it out of the workflow, in this particular workflow is a two-step process, but I would attach the case here, attach a letter to the case, and then send that letter. And we can see 301 is no longer there. If I come back to my dashboard, it brings me back to 301 again, and I can see I have attachments here now, right? The letter that I just attached is here. I can download that and open that, and I can see some of the information. Well, the information that's entered on the case is put into this letter to be sent out by the Conduit Health Department. So things like the owner's name, Paula Jackson, and their address, what the name of the pet was that was involved in the bite incident, and when it occurred. So all of that can be put in here and then sent out from there, either via email or printed out and sent out. So whatever works for the particular jurisdiction. And again, a lot of this can be configured and put together in a way that kind of matches the jurisdiction, because one of the strengths of Maven is its configurability. So that covers the two ways in which we could interact with potential rabies cases. So either through a rabies animal event or a bite incident coming in through the general public. I'm going to pivot now to talking a little bit about the arboviral, how we would track arboviral infections or arboviral surveillance. And I'm going to start by looking at an arboviral infection, looking at an incident in a specific animal. So I have this this particular one case here highlighted, and I'll come in to that particular case. And this is a case where a horse is exhibiting some kind of symptoms associated with arboviral, an arboviral infection, sorry. And again, very similar question packages to what we see. There's no significant change in the dashboard or how it's laid out here compared to the rabies cases. So similar look here. Again, we have an administration question package. We have some domestic animal information. We also have some clinical information, which we could go into and see, hey, when did the symptoms start presenting themselves in this particular animal, in this horse? What symptoms did they have? This is a multi-select where we can indicate they had fever, depression, lethargy, that sort of thing. If the animal had died, you could put that information in here. And in this case, that's not what happened, but we could say, hey, they died on the 10th of June. And then based off of the entry there, we would have a follow-up question. In this case, what was the method of death, natural or euthanized? So I'm going to cancel out of there and not save it, because that's not the case for this particular animal. And then, of course, you can see the submitting agency owner information, laboratory testing information, similar to what we saw in the rabies cases. The laboratory testing information in particular is pretty much the same because it is actually the same question package. The difference is that some of the options change because of the type of case. The fact that this is an arboviral infection means that the types of tests indicated here change as well. So I can see here, I have this IgM ELISA test with an equivocal lab result. If I wanted to add an additional one, Maven supports the ability through its question packages of having repeatables, right? Repeatable blocks here. So I can say add new, go ahead and add in a PCR lab test, and then put in a positive lab result there. So you could add additional tests based off of those specimens. Save that. So that's an instance of how we would want to investigate for an arboviral infection for a specific horse or specific animal, I should say, in this case, a horse. If we want to start looking at tracking or looking at multiple animals or insects, we could do that through an arbovirus surveillance case. In this case, we've configured this to look, and the scenario here is looking at mosquitoes, right? Again, a different case type, arbovirus surveillance. Again, same view, some familiar question packages with the laboratory testing here, but I'll go into the collection information here to just kind of show you how this is specific to the arboviral surveillance and how we would indicate which mosquitoes we tested, right? Or which mosquitoes we collected, I should say. So again, we could have information about where we collected them, what kind of trap was used, and then what kind of mosquito species was found as well. I could go in, you'll note here, it indicates the species, the number of each type of sex, that sort of thing, and it calculates. I could go in and add additional and say, all right, I want to add in Aedes albopictus here, and I could see the questions are a little bit different because I haven't fully filled them out yet. So I can put in adults here as well. And then I can say how many eggs, larvae collected, pupae, that sort of thing. I could start putting in information about the number of females, the number of males, and then some additional unknown sex. And I can push that when I move out of that question, it calculates here. So that's a good example of how Maven's questions can be configured to do some kind of logical exercise or calculation, right? In this case, we have a calculation to indicate the number of mosquitoes that were collected of this particular species. And that's a beneficial thing to have. That kind of calculation is beneficial to have because that's something that can be brought into a report. And so we've looked at the way you can enter data into Maven based off of these different kind of case scenarios or event scenarios. Getting Maven out, you can do that via the reports. We do have extracts and that sort of thing as well. But I'll highlight a couple of the reports that we've created specifically for these arboviral investigations and the rabies items. So for arboviral, we have a couple of different reports that we added in, which would be the mosquito counts. We see we have no parameters here, but I can go ahead and run this report, and what it'll provide me with is, the number of mosquitoes collected, the method of collection on a weekly basis by county, right? We can see that for all the counties that we have been tracking in Utah. Our demo system is built around the Utah. So that's one report that you can do in here. And then another one we have here is unvaccinated arbovirus infections. And the reason why I want to show this one is because this one has actual parameters we can fill out. We can have a date range or a period. In this case, I'm going to select a period of 6 months, right? And we could even have this look at just one county or just one animal type, right? As well. I'm going to leave those blanks so you can see the entire the report when I run it. But so again, the only parameter I'm setting here is the 6 months. So I can run this report and we can see the arboviral, the type of arbovirus on the left-hand side here with the totals, and then it's broken down into animal type and the counties and how many we're finding. So foxes, horses. If I look at horses, there's three in Salt Lake County of the Western equine encephalitis. So again, this is another potentially useful report. But it also highlights some of the things that you can do with Maven's reporting feature, which allows you to build these reports within the administration side of the application itself. You can also plug in other reporting tools as needed, and you can also export these results too. You don't need to just run it and have it show up in a different tab in your browser. You can export it into a CSV or an Excel file as well. So that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to cover with regards to the reports and with what we've kind of implemented as part of the rabies and the arboviral piece. So I will turn it back to Pam at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. You did a great job, and there were some great questions in the chat, and I appreciate that. We've covered today some of the ways that Maven can help with non-human surveillance, and so at this point, I want to open the floor to any questions that you may have. You can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put the questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we will do our best to answer. There are, like I said, a lot of great questions already in the chat, and I've done my best to answer them. So Ken, there's a question about Maven reports and being able to create spatial heat maps. Do you want to field that question?
So spatial heat maps, so you mean like, let me pull up the chat so I can see it.
Okay. All right. So in the meantime, there's also a question about whether Maven comes standard with all of the modules, or do jurisdictions get choose what to get? And I started typing the answer and then Ken finished. So while he's thinking about the spatial heat maps question, I will answer that one for Katie. And the answer is we do have the models broken up into groups like GCD, STD, HIV, TB, and so like GCD is a large group of diseases that we put together into one grouping. And I'm pretty sure that Arbo and Rabies are both in GCD. So in addition to being able to track Arbo and Rabies, you would be able to track about 90 plus reportable conditions to the CDC. But we're always flexible too. If you only need Rabies or only need Arbo, then we could work within that.
And sorry, I stopped sharing because I did see the Stephen sent over an example of a heat map. And yes, we have done similar reports in Maven kind of on a county level. So we have done these reports. There are some geocoded reporting capabilities within Maven that you should be able to replicate that kind of thing. Out of the box, I'm not sure. I'd have to look into specifics of what we've done out of the box for other clients or what have you. But yes, it does have that capability and those geocoder reports like that.
We also, just to bring up a group another group within Conduent that is not part of the Maven team. If you guys have not checked out Healthy Communities Institute for data visualization and data analysis of the data that you guys collect, they do a phenomenal job, and I highly recommend going to look at Healthy Communities Institute, which is another public health group within Conduent.
I saw Jen Brown has her hand up, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Hi,
you.
Jen.
Hi. I have two questions. First of all, thank you for a great presentation. I've been trying to figure out how to upgrade our animal bite surveillance system in Indiana. I'm the state public health vet in Indiana for a very long time. Currently, we're using NBS for all reportable conditions, including animal bites, even though they're not reportable to CDC. And I don't know how much you know about NBS, but there's some significant limitations to using it for animal bites. So I have two questions. One is, I'm not aware of any other platform that would capture non-human public health surveillance data in this way. Are you? It's a little awkward to ask you that, I know, but are you aware? And if you are, what do you think are the advantages of Maven over whatever else is out there? And then the other question I would have is, that's my first thing. The other thing is that we just switched to NBS in 2019. So I don't know how realistic it would be that we would be considering a switch to anything at this time, but I really want to get animal bites out of NBS. So I'm interested in the option you mentioned about getting this kind of as a standalone system for non-human data. I totally recognize that would not allow us to take full advantage of some of the linking functionality that you demonstrated, but even so, I think there would be huge advantages to doing that compared to what we're doing now. So what information can you give me about pricing, or can you give me the name of the person that I should follow up with later to get that information?
So I'll take both of those questions, Ken, since I'm unmuted and apparently working well with audio at this point. So first of all, I don't know of any other system that is doing non-human surveillance in the way that we are. And that doesn't mean they're not out there. It just means that it hasn't come to my attention. I do know that our advantages in the public health informatics space in general are the fact that things like if you need to start collecting new data, my very favorite example is human related, because that's generally what we deal with. If the CDC decides tomorrow that shoe size is a relevant data element for tuberculosis cases and they want you to start reporting it on Monday and it's Thursday, you can do that with Maven. That's not as easy to do with other systems. And when I say you can do that with Maven, you can do that without calling us. You don't have to pick up the phone or send an email. So anything that you want to collect, anything that you want to, as far as data goes, anything that you want to report, if you want to generate the letters, somebody asked about letters to or printouts for dog bites so to be submitted to insurance companies. You can have those available. The data is bi-directional between the portal, which is secure and sits outside of your firewall, and you can make certain data elements available to the people who reported in through the portal, without making everything available to the people who put the cases into the portal. That's very important because you do want to protect people's information. So that's where the advantage comes in that Maven allows you to take control of your public health informatics application and work for it as opposed to, or have it work for you as opposed to you working for it. Pricing, please email me because we're not allowed to discuss that in a public forum, but email me and I will get you in touch with the appropriate people.
And I'm going to quickly interject here because I know we're running up against time. And I know these sessions end very abruptly. So we do have both of our email addresses up here on the screen. please don't hesitate to email either of us or both of us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have and getting in more involved in talking about your needs. Again, we'd be happy to do that or point you to some additional people for you to talk to.
Absolutely. And the last question was, how long does it take to set up and use this system? That depends on which models and modules you purchase. So it can be as quick as a couple of months. And if you buy anything and everything that we have, that could go for a couple of years. So it depends. There's no great answer for that. Thanks for the thumbs up, Jamie. I think we're losing people. So yeah, just say thank you for everyone as we wait for the session to automatically end.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining the session today. We really appreciate your input and your questions and your participation. And please be sure to visit the Conduit booth as well as our other sponsors and exhibitors in the virtual exhibit hall. You can continue these conversations via chat there as well. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.